Okay.
On this. All right. So then are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. This is the mixed Dandelions podcast where we talk about being mixed military and more. Today I have Katherine. Do you prefer Katherine or Kathy
Yeah,
or what?
that works.
Katherine's good. All right. So she's actually this is the first time I'm meeting her, but I know her older sister and her brother because they are friends with my little sister. So Katherine, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to someone other than like myself about my experience.
I know. Well, that's kind of why I like to do this because I was like, as adults, we don't always like talk about the, growing up in the military and our experiences. And I was just like, it's kind of fun to have something in common to talk to with other people because, and two, you don't even know that that's something you might have in common with somebody until it's brought up. But like, it's got to be, I guess, like, unless somebody brings it up, how do you know?
Yeah.
So,
I've always thought that's interesting because it's like, oh, this happened in my life. And then you finally talk to someone and you're like, wait a minute. I've always thought that same thing, or I've experienced that too.
mhm.
It's not just me.
Or like I was asked the question today and I was like, hold on, I have to think of where I was living, like what grade I was in, where did I live? And then like I can figure out the year from there. And they're
Yeah.
like, what? I was like, I moved every few years. So like I have my life is the timetable is a little bit different in
Yeah.
my mind than other people's. So no,
Hmm.
thanks for coming on. Let's get started, I guess. Why don't you just introduce yourself? Maybe tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, what to share? I am 34 years old, but I spent the first 12 years growing up as a military brat, which I always tell everyone was like the best way to start because I had an interesting life growing up. My dad was in the Marine Corps, and so even though I was in a military kid for the first 12 years of my life, I tell people that like that same um that same pattern of like moving every 3 to 5 years has stuck with me well into my adult life as a 35-year-old. And so I often joke, but I know it's so true that like I have issues with like staying still. I always get the itch. I need to move. I really like to move to different places. And so I'm currently in Washington, D.C. It's my second time living in D.C. Prior to this, I was living in California and then Spain. And then I can, like, tell you the 3 year chunks going backwards. And I'm currently doing product management for the government, which is really cool because I still get to move around and not move around, but like travel,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I love it. So that's a little bit about me. I'm the youngest of five.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Five?
yes,
I did
which
not
is
realize.
interesting in of itself. Yeah, youngest of five, and then I am Black and Filipina, proud Black and Filipina.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with that itch to move because I get that. Like my dad retired, I was almost 19. We lived in Arizona, and then 3 years later, I moved up to Chicago. And I've been in Chicago since 1998, but even still, like we slowly keep moving out of the city. So like we're in a suburb right outside the city.
Mhm.
I call it an urban suburb because it's sort of like just an extension of the city. So we're still, there's not a lot of driveways, there's still a lot of
Mhm.
traffic, and so it's still got that urban city feel to it. But like we've been in this house for a while and I'm like, I gotta go, like we need to move. Even if it's just out of this house into a different town or city, like preferably I'd like to go somewhere closer to someone in my family. But
Yeah.
yes, like so next year, I think I'm gonna, or this summer, I'm gonna like repaint some stuff and hoping that'll help give me that like
New feel.
help. Yes, we'll see. All right. So you said you are Filipina and Black. So and you were a Marine Corps brat. So 12 years old. So where did your dad end up retiring at?
Out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Okay, and then you guys stayed there for a little while.
No, so when he retired, we moved to Vegas.
Okay, and then did
Yeah.
you finish high school there?
No, I ended up having to move again to California where I ended up finishing high school. But that was such a funny question because I think when I was in Vegas, that might have been the longest place I lived, which was like 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
So I did all of middle school, and then halfway through junior year, my dad got a job teaching in California. So he was
Oh,
like, "We
wow.
move to California." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I made it all the way to halfway of junior year, and you're
Right.
telling me that we need to move." And I was like, "This is the I've never asked you to like not move me. Just let me finish high school with the people that I've been to going to school with the last couple of years," which like as a military kid, you get so used to changing schools all the time. So you're like, that
Hmm.
doesn't matter where I go now. But I was like, just let me finish high school at the same place. And I had to move to California. So I ended up
Like,
finishing
nope.
high school in California.
Wow. And I feel like 12 years old, like, because you're junior high, what is that, like seventh grade, sixth, seventh grade,
Yeah.
probably? Like, did you find that that was a difficult, like, time in your life for your dad to have retired, I guess, where you guys, I mean, you were still like a little bit, was there a military base near Vegas? Like, were you guys part of
No,
any of that?
no. So I think for me, what was interesting was that like, all everything that I've known about school up until sixth grade was military, not military school, but like going to school with other kids in the military.
Hmm.
So I remember not joking with my dad, but telling my dad, I was like, this is civilian life. Like I'm going to school with these
Right.
civilians. They're so rude. And like it was this weird shift of like, you grow up in a military household and you follow certain rules of the military, but like
Yes.
you transition and you're like in that awkward puberty stage. And so you're just,
Right.
"Oh, this is just so weird to navigate," but it ended up being fine.
Oh, that's good. Did you think that there was like a big difference? So then when you went to school in Camp Lejeune, did you go to a Department of Defense school, a DOD school, or did you go
Yeah,
to like, was it a DOD school?
it was on
So
base
then,
and everything.
oh wow. So then it wasn't this like the same as I guess a regular US public school. So then when you transferred from that school to the Vegas public school, like did you find that there was a lot different like between I guess even just like teachers or like adjusting to that school, was that different than how you adjusted to the Camp Lejeune school?
I think it was just the students that were more of an adjustment because in my mind, it was like they didn't grow up with the same level of like respect that you give people older than you. And so I was like,
Hmm.
you guys are like out here cussing and smoking and probably doing regular middle school kid things, like, right? But
Right.
in my mind, I attributed that to like civilian school and not Department of Defense school.
How funny. Well, so where was your favorite place to live growing up?
Um, I would like to say that it was Okinawa, but I only lived in Okinawa from the ages of 1 to 5, so, like, I don't really remember much,
Hmm.
and I often tell my dad, I'm like, "Why couldn't you have gotten stationed in Okinawa when I was older, and we
Oh, how
did North
funny.
Carolina when I was younger?" Oh, I think I'm gonna have to say that Camp Lejeune was my favorite just because I remember it
Right.
more. Um, and I think like I had such a great childhood in Camp Lejeune. So we lived on base. I went to school on base. I had the freedom to like ride my bike to the 7 day store and
Hmm.
to the O Club and to my friend's house and played soccer. And I enjoyed living there. Oh, and like my dad would take us shrimping and
Oh,
fishing.
wow.
Yeah, so it was such a cool place to grow up. And now I think about like as an adult, if I would have lived there, I probably wouldn't have liked it, but it was cool as a kid.
Yeah. And I feel like there's always different things, like when you are military, like things that you can do on base. And it is sort of different. Like you've got this like safety factor, like people
Hmm.
feel safe on the base, they feel secure. And then it is its own community and its own like institution. And so there's like-minded people and like I said, that common theme
Yeah.
going on in the families and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I was 11 years old riding my bike all over the base
right.
by myself with no no cell phones around at that time. Like no care in the world. But now I have a niece and like she says that she goes and she walks with her friend to the little shopping center. I'm like, do you know what kind of crazy people are out there? Don't walk there by yourself. You're a girl. Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah, like I've got the Find iPhone on my phone for my kids' phones. Like we're checking it in. I was like, when we were younger, our parents probably didn't even know where we were.
Right?
I remember I called my mom collect. We were at Scott Air Force Base and I was on the other side of the base and we walked everywhere because yeah, I was like 14, 15, 16 years old. So we were just walking and I called her collect because I was just like, I do not want to walk all the way from the flight line all the way back home. That was like a 30-minute walk. I was tired. It was hot. So I called her collect. And when it says please state your name. And then I was like really fast. I was like, Jennifer, come pick me up at the pool. And then she's like, and it says, do you accept the charges? And she said no and hung up. I was like, what? She just laughed to me there. I was like,
Oh,
man. Yeah, I got home. I was like, why didn't you come pick me up? She's like, because you walked over there, you can walk back. I was like, oh, but I was tired.
uh,
So where has been your favorite place to live in your life? Like as an adult, as a child, all the places you've lived.
of all the places I've lived. So there was a year, I was in 2018. I just randomly quit my job and decided to move to Spain. It wasn't random. I like planned it a year in advance, but I lived in Spain for a year teaching English.
Oh
Um
wow.
and I went out there because I was like, I want to be bilingual, and the best way to be bilingual or like to learn another language is to just fully
Oh
immerse
yeah.
yourself in that
Mm-hmm.
area. So I lived in Spain for a year, and I think that was
Wow.
a great experience, but like also not real life. I don't consider it real life because I was like, I'm really only doing this temporarily. Um, so of all the like places I've actually lived and created like a real life, I would say it's DC, um, which is probably why I came back a second time. So I used to
Mm-hmm.
live here after grad school from 2013 to 2018. And then I came back in 2021. And I think like one, I just really love the East Coast vibe. It's totally different from the West Coast, but I think
Yes.
what I really like about DC is it's a transplant city. And so like
Okay.
no one that you meet in DC is from DC. Everyone comes into DC from, so it's kind of like military life, right?
Yeah.
So everyone comes to DC either for work or for school. And so you're just literally meeting people from all over the country or all over the world. And I feel like there's like this energy of people who are like, what's my next step? I'm gonna, go getters. And I'm like, I fit in so well here. So I really like it. And it's like easy access to flights in the Caribbean or like to Europe. So I like
Oh.
easy traveling point from here also.
I heard, yeah, a lot of people that I know who have lived in DC, they really liked it. Like I don't hear a lot of too much bad stuff. Like overall, they're like the pros definitely outweigh the cons of
For
living
sure.
in DC. So
Mm.
I've been there, like visit for maybe a week or so, and it was really cool. I stayed at it wasn't Andrews. Was it an Air Force base? I don't think it was Andrews Air Force Base. Maybe it was. I don't remember, but no, just visiting a friend. He was a Marine and I was just visiting him. And but it was really cool. Like we got to see the White House and the Capitol. And yeah,
Really, it's
it was
pretty
a neat
cool.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going back because too there's a lot of history. And so I wouldn't mind like taking my kids there, and
Mhm.
it's the country's capital, right? You got to go at least
Yeah.
once. So in Spain, did you learn Spanish?
I did. I met my partner there, and when I met him, he didn't speak English. So I
Oh
was
wow.
like, perfect. The only way that we could communicate is if I speak Spanish. And thank God he was so patient with me because I'm not patient with helping him learn English, unfortunately.
Feel
Um,
like I didn't reciprocate.
yeah. Um, but so I remember going there saying, I'm not gonna leave unless I feel like I'm fluent. And then when I
Mhm.
left after a year, I was like, I definitely feel like I'm fluent. So yes. So now I'm bilingual.
That's awesome. I would love to do some, but that's true. Like, because like even in Okinawa, like I took Japanese in high school, and it's so much easier to learn that because it's all around you.
Yeah.
And so now I've decided I made myself a vision board. This is the first time I've ever done that, a 2023 vision board, and I've set up
Nice.
like written goals and like how I want to accomplish those goals. And it's family, fun, and fitness. And so part of fun is I want to learn Spanish and Japanese, or like I guess like brush up and learn more so that
Hmm.
I can become conversational and communicate more in those two language. I was just like, but I'm 46 years old, so it's going to be a challenge. But I was, even before like recording this, I was working on the goals for those two languages. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Because Japanese, like, yeah, like I'm not around it a lot. But and
Yeah,
when you immerse yourself into a language, like into that country, that's probably the easiest way to learn it. So
for
good
sure.
for you. Good for you.
I will say,
Um,
don't let age stop you because I picked it up at 32. Maybe I don't remember
mhm.
how old I was. Maybe I was 32 or 31 when I moved out there, and I was like, I'm gonna learn it. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm pretty, at least right now, come January. It's January. Ask me in June.
Yeah.
I'm pretty focused and I'm pretty intent on like doing. I was like, nope, I'm gonna do it. I've got my weight loss stuff going. I've got this going. Like
Hmm.
I'm focused, I'm determined, I'm motivated. I'm doing like 12-week increments. So in 12 weeks, I'm gonna like reevaluate and see where I
Nice.
am and see where my motivation is with all of this stuff, with my vision board and my goals and my intentions for the year. So we'll see. We'll
I
see. Okay, so what was your favorite thing about growing up in the military?
I think it was the constant change.
Mhm.
Change of scenery, change of houses. I mean, who doesn't like, oh, new house, new room? Um, and meeting new people all the time. Like, my best friend changed every 3 years, and I thought that was a cool experience to just
Mhm.
meet new people all the time. So for me, my favorite thing was change, to the point where, like, as an adult, I recognize that I prefer change over like stability. Um,
Mhm.
so that was my favorite part of growing up in the military.
That's interesting. I think now that you say that, like that's something that I think I got used to and I like I like meeting new people. I like yeah, like having a new house or just changing something so that
Yeah.
it like it's fresh, you're refreshing and having something new and it's some you're discovering something new and you're
Mhm.
experiencing something new. And I think that that's something as military brats, like we were very fortunate to be
Yeah,
able to. And then it also helps us cope with change, right? As an
sure.
adult, like in coping with like when somebody moves or when you have to move and you have to say goodbye and when you have to change houses or something. So what was your least favorite thing or what was the most difficult thing?
I don't know. Because again, I think since I was a little kid, it was exciting and fun for
Hmm.
me. And I
Okay.
think if I were older, when I was a military kid, I probably would have found things I didn't like. Um, so like I could say my least favorite thing was when my dad retired and we had to go into the civilian world, but I recognize I'm looking at my life through like a 12-year-old's eyes.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Normally people will be like, oh, it's the same thing as my favorite thing. But
I liked it.
well, that's good. You made the best of everything. I like that. Um, okay, so well, let's talk about you being biracial and multi-ethnic. I guess did you in your travel, since you have traveled a lot, like in the US, out of the US, you probably, could be considered multifacial, where
Hmm.
people kind of like aren't sure, I guess, like what you are.
Yeah.
Did you find in your travels, like in certain countries or areas or something, like how people perceived you? Like did they think you were, could they tell that you were a foreigner, or did they think that you were a local, like by how you looked? Or
So I think that I have been fortunate enough to, I guess, to other people to look like ethnically ambiguous or
Mhm.
like an ethnic chameleon. I think I realized for me that when I travel to certain places, I get confused with people that are from there. And
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. So like, for example, when I lived in Spain, interestingly enough, there's a very large Dominican community in Spain. And so
Okay.
when I would go out there, people thought I was Dominican. And I'm like, nope, I'm American and I'm Black and Filipina. But thanks for thinking that like I'm from here, outsider. Or like if I go to Puerto Rico, people mistake me for Puerto Rican. But then if I go to Hawaii,
Mhm.
people mistake me for Hawaiian. And I'm like, cool, this works in my favor. But I also realized like I haven't gone to very like places like Germany where I would definitely not be thought of as a German. Um, but yeah, I most of the time I can like blend myself into where I'm visiting.
What about in the US? Do you think at different places in the US, like how are you perceived, or how do people, I guess, experiences with how you are perceived, or even in college? Like what was it
Well,
like in college?
in the US, I definitely think most people perceive me as Latina because sometimes, a lot of times, people will come up to me and like start asking me questions in Spanish, and I'm like, luckily I can answer you, but not
Mm.
Latina. Um, but I think not off the top of my head. But I mean, the typical questions of like, oh, what are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? Or like, where are you from? And I'm like, okay, do you really want, as I got older, after like getting that question a bunch of times, I'm like, do you want to know where I live or do you want to know what I'm mixed with? And it's
Hmm.
usually they want to know what I'm mixed with. I'm like, okay, then just ask that. Like, don't ask me where I'm from because I'll tell you I'm from California.
Right. It's like, I'm an American. I'm from America. No, where are you from? Where are you
You
from
mean what?
originally?
I'll straight up be like, you mean what am I ethnically? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay.
I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a difference between nationality, ethnicity, and race, right? And
Yeah.
so and then a lot of people, and especially Americans, I feel like American is an ethnicity. And I guess it could be argued
Yeah.
or debated that maybe it is, but it's such a melting pot and it's so diverse that American is your nationality, just like
Yeah.
I guess like Colombian or Mexican or something, that is your nationality, not necessarily your ethnicity. And so I think people get confused with that. So like you could be from Germany, immigrate over to the US, become an American citizen, and you're an American. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think people tend to forget that. So, but what about in college? Like, did you ever were there ever, like, did you join any organizations, or was there anything, or I
I
guess
did.
to
So,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Say for me, I think college was an interesting like ethnic identity development period. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I vividly remember like growing up, I asked my dad one time, I was like, Dad, what am I? And he was like, you're human. I'm like, no, 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 Dad, like
Mm.
am I? He goes, you're human. I said, no. When someone asks me what I am, what am I supposed to tell them? He goes, you tell them that you're human and it's none of their damn business. I'm like, oh, you don't understand what I'm trying to ask you. Um, so then like, and I grew up predominantly, I was raised more Filipina than Black.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, like I ate rice, I called my sisters by the Filipino title of respect, like all I eat with my hands, all the kind of like Filipino upbringing, can't speak the language at all, but like I identify very strongly as Filipina. And then but like in my social circles, like in high school and then in college, a lot of my friends were Black and I like was very into the not the Black culture, but like all things Black in my social life. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember like trying to join the Filipino club in college and I did not feel comfortable. And I was like, I do not feel like I'm Filipina enough for this club, even though I am like hardcore Filipina. That's how I was raised. Um, and then I remember like I was like, okay, what exactly does it mean to be Black? Because, like, even though my dad's Black, he never talked about it ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm just going to take these African American history classes and African American lit classes and join these clubs and do all these events so that I can, like, understand that part of my culture since I wasn't raised in that part of my culture. Um, and then I went to grad school. So one of my grad degrees is higher ed administration, and we had to take a class on like student development theory. And some of the like different theories we learned about were related to like ethnic development and like Black identity development and multiracial identity development. And as I was reading the book, it's kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning of the call. I was reading the book and I was like, oh my God, that was me. I've gone through each of these stages of my ethnic identity development, but I didn't know that it's like it's a theory.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that it was me figuring out what it means to be biracial in life. But like, there's theories written about it and other people that experience it. And I was just like, oh my God, my life is making sense.
That's interesting because no, I feel the same way. Like I mean, I grew up, I guess, American, like quote unquote American. Like we grew up in the military, we were in the States, we lived in England, we did go to Okinawa, but like we weren't, I think my mom was a little more Americanized. And so now as an adult, and I start to, I guess, embrace that multicultural and multi-ethnic and biracial like identity and self, like I tried now to learn more about the Okinawan side of me. And so
Mhm.
like because even when I was in school and I asked the same question, like what am I, what do I mark when it asks me what my
Yeah.
race is, like because I feel like if I mark white then I'm sort of lying because mom is Japanese, but then if I mark Japanese I'm sort of lying because dad is white. And so and I was told mark white. They're like, you mark white because it's whatever your dad is, that's what you mark.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
was like, well, I don't feel like doing that. Like,
Yeah.
and so even like today, when I see things that are, choose only one,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
will, like, I don't always mark the same thing. And so, yeah, like, so it's an interesting thing. And I've had people, I don't know if you've had people, maybe you can answer this, where they'll be like, now as an adult and I'm focusing a lot more on the Japanese Okinawan, like learning more about that and that identifying with that a little bit more. People will be like, why aren't you more proud of your white side? Why aren't you trying to study more about your white side? And I'm like,
mhm.
because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
Like granted, yes, I grew up in a diverse community living in the military. I grew up, different places, but we still grew up as Americans. Like we were
Yeah.
still American. We follow American traditions, the holidays, and we ate both foods, but we
Mhm.
still, we would live in America until we moved to Okinawa when I was a teenager. And so it's like I think a lot of people don't understand like that balance. And so
Yeah.
it's not that you're ashamed of that other one. It's just that you grew up one way where it
Yeah.
was focused on one. And so now you want to
Learn.
grow and learn
Yeah.
the other part and like having that balance of the two. So I don't know, like, have you ever had like people, I guess, question your, like you said, you weren't comfortable in the Filipina club. Like, why
Right.
was that?
I think, and I don't know if it had, honestly, I think in my mind, I thought I wasn't comfortable because I was biracial and that like
Mm-hmm.
they didn't see me as someone that looked Filipino. So I
Okay.
wasn't like accepted into the group. It could be that, or it could just be that they were all friends already and they were like, I don't need a new friend. But in my mind, I was interpreting it as like, I'm not Filipino enough for this club. I'm out of here. It's funny because since I didn't feel comfortable in that club, and then I ended up going to a Hawaii Pacific Islander club event where I fit in perfectly, but like everyone in that club was Hawaiian Filipino, and I was like,
Um,
I just couldn't fit in the Filipino American club, but in the Hawaii Filipino club, it was perfect. So I thought that was interesting, but I think like the only time I've ever been questioned about why I'm doing one side and not the other side might have been like around learning the Spanish. And
mhm.
brother and sisters were like, "Why aren't you trying to learn Tagalog? You're not even Latina.
Uh,
Filipina. Why don't
yeah.
you learn Tagalog? You don't know your mother tongue." And I'm like, first of all, what good is learning Tagalog gonna do for me in my life? The only person I can speak to in Tagalog is my mother, who happens to speak English. Like, there's no need for me to learn that language. It's fine. Do I feel bad sometimes? Like, I sometimes call myself a fake Filipina because I don't
Oh,
understand. Yeah, of course it's weird, like not picking up, not knowing that language, but I blame my mom on that, but it's okay.
right?
Yeah, but that's
No,
it.
I feel you on that. Like I get embarrassed when people ask me, "Oh, do you speak Japanese?" And I get like this. I was like, I'm not a real Japanese. Like, and I've made like friends who are Japanese, but because I couldn't speak Japanese well, like I felt like a fake and like I didn't
Yeah,
fit in, and it was one of those weird things. And but yeah, they'll be like, "Oh, well, who would you?" I was like, well, my mom, she speaks Japanese fluently. My dad speaks conversational. They're like, wait, both your parents speak Japanese and you don't know Japanese? I'm like, it's not my fault.
right? It's
I
not
was
our
like,
fault. I would tell my mom, I'm like, you missed out on an opportunity for me to be
exactly,
trilingual. It's your
exactly.
fault.
My mom did have, I remember, I can't remember, I think I don't remember if it was when we lived there or when we visited once. And one of her aunts did yell at her for not like continuing to teach us Japanese. And I was like, this is like the best thing to see your parent as the kid. And my
Yeah,
mom's like, oh, whatever, whatever. Like, stop bothering me with it, whatever. And I was like, no, mom, you need to listen to her. She
right.
is your aunt and she's telling you something. Why didn't you? And then her thing too, though, a lot is like because I needed to learn English.
I was gonna just say, like maybe a few months ago when I like yelled at my mom or being like, why didn't you teach me? That was the first time she said, like,
Mhm.
I just moved to the States and I was trying to learn English. So I was speaking English. And I was like, okay, I fully understand that. Now it makes sense. And I'm not going to blame you anymore. But like, damn.
I know, and it's true because, like, so for me, I guess, like, I was born in Okinawa and then removed, I think, right before I turned 4. And so when I noticed when my mom is in Okinawa, she's speaking mostly Japanese. Like,
Mhm.
her English is basically with us and maybe other people in the American military community, but other than that, like she's speaking Japanese everywhere else because her family is there. Like if she's working, it's most likely going to be off base, and she's communicating in Japanese, so her like English accent gets thicker after leaving Okinawa. And so I'm like, yeah, I guess so, because then we moved from Okinawa to North Carolina. So then she was still learning English, and then we moved back. And so it was like a whole, so I was like, all right, I guess I can't blame you too much, but when both your parents speak it,
Yeah.
like, come on. But now that I'm trying to relearn Japanese, like she's someone definitely now that I can like chat with and
Yeah.
talk with and stuff like that. But so we'll see, like I said, how that goes. Because she also speaks the Okinawan language. And so
Um,
I that'll be a third goal. So we'll see how Spanish and Japanese go and
yeah.
then figure out from there. Cause yeah, like what good is the Okinawan dialect gonna do me?
Right.
Except to talk to her and maybe listen to some gossip if she's like that was one thing I told her. I was like, when we were growing up and you switched from Japanese to Okinawan, I knew you guys were gossiping because then
Right.
you'd switch back. So, um, let's see what else. So, how did you like? I guess so. You said you grew up mostly Filipino, like with the food and stuff like that. Was there ever a balance, like where, like I guess from where your dad is from in the States? Like, did you guys visit his family? Was there any kind of like balance or
My
and like
grandparents, well, my grandpa on my dad's side would come out to North Carolina and visit us like every year. So that was cool. And then I think we visited my great uncle in
oh wow.
Georgia one time. Um, but like I think the more consistent like hanging out with my dad's side happened after he retired and we moved to
Mhm.
California because his family was like 30 minutes or 40 minutes from where we lived. So
Oh,
then that
wow.
like we would go visit my grandparents all the time. And it's interesting because as a kid, so my grandparents used to live in like South Central LA.
Okay.
Now it's like it's very ghetto out there now. Like it's been taken over by homeless people and all that kind of stuff. But when I was a kid, we would go out there and I was like, ooh, cool. Hanging out with my grandparents, walking to the store. Like there's all these people on the street and cool. And then like as I got a little older, I was like, wait a minute. My dad is technically from South Central LA. My grandparents' house is in the hood. Like, whoa. Talk about a culture shock as like an adult, but like, as a kid, you're just like, oh, this is just life.
Right.
Um, but so that was that. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I just went on a tangent.
Well, do you think then growing up in the military, like being in the military for a little bit and moving around a little bit, like, do you think that like what kind of I guess impact or influence do you think that had on your identity as being biracial, as being like half Filipina and half Black, or even um like did you guys ever go to the Philippines? Like were you ever able to be in the Philippines?
No, we never went to the Philippines. And I always said the first time I ever go, I'm gonna go with my mom, just because
Mhm.
it's like it is my mother's country. I'm gonna go there with her. I think she's planning to go in like the next 2 years or something. So definitely gonna go um when she goes, but I will not go without her.
Right. Makes sense. Did you have a lot of friends that were like growing up? Do you remember if you had friends who were also mixed or who were Filipina?
Never Filipina, but one of my best friends was Korean and white. So she lived 2 doors down from me in Camp Lejeune, and we were best friends for like the 3 years that she lived there. But she was also biracial.
Did your mom hang out with like did she have her little group of
No,
Filipina friends? No?
not in North Carolina, but I know that like when we were in Virginia, our I think our neighbor, the wife was Filipina, so she would hang out with her all the time.
Okay. Because yeah,
Yeah.
like I feel like sometimes like I had a friend, her mom was Thai, and so she always had her little group of friends, and like that's where we would hear the Thai, or I'd have, yes, like my friends who were half Filipina or half Korean or something. And so those were all those, it was like that Asian, influence that you
Yeah.
get and that you get to see and be a part of. And I think that too helped like with the I guess for me, for balancing the two, like being American but then also being Japanese, because I was able to see all of that and experience all
Oh.
of that.
Mhm.
So do you think that growing up in the military or being in a military community where you would maybe have a little more diversity, do you think that that had an influence or impact on your experiences?
Like ethnically or in
Yes.
general? Well, I definitely think so because, you know, when you grow up in the military, you just see people that look like you, but then people that don't look like you, but like it's not uncommon to see people that look like you. Um,
Right.
and then part of that like transition shock into civilian world that I was talking about, when I went to middle school, it was like everyone was either this, or that.
Mm-hmm.
They were Asian or they were Black, but like that was really it. I don't really remember seeing too many mixed people um, in middle school or in high school. And then maybe when I got to California, I saw more than when I was in school in Vegas. But like, I definitely think growing up in the military and being able to be exposed to people from different ethnic backgrounds, and then even, growing up in a whole different country definitely helped that like ethnic identity and my ability to like fit in with people or like transition into civilian schools with people
I
and
think
even
that,
as an adult.
yeah, and it's great, like how you said it's not uncommon to see people that look like you within that military community. Like, I think that's very true, and I guess like that's probably a good like way to explain to
Mhm.
people, like, and then when you get out of that military community, it's not as diverse. And so yes,
Yeah.
like you don't see, and I think that's where representation, right, is important, and how people now are talking about representation in movies and
Yeah.
TV shows and things like that, because you want to see people who look like you. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that was one thing that I probably had some like a hard time with adjusting to when we moved, when my dad retired in Arizona, because
Mhm.
it wasn't like, people always thought that I was Hispanic, but then I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
half white, half Japanese. And then that comes with a whole bunch of weird questions after that.
Yeah.
But there wasn't very much like people that looked like me. Or even when I went to college in Chicago, it was, a similar thing. And so
Mhm.
I think, yeah, like in the military, it's not uncommon. You feel represented, you see people, you don't feel different.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
think
great way to put
we
it.
don't feel different until we're out of it and you're like, "Huh, something's weird. Something's different here, but it's not me, it's you guys."
Well, yes, and I feel like that's kind of, I'm like, it's not my problem, it's your problem if you can't
Yeah.
figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
so no, I think that's like the words, those are great like words to describe that, I think. So what lessons do you think you've learned from growing up in the military that have kind of stuck with you as an adult?
Oh my god. I think the biggest lessons are about, like, change is constant and, like, the whole not sink or swim, but it's either, adapt or fail kind
Hmm.
of. Um, it's interesting, any time in my adult life that I've had to do job interviews, when they either, like, ask about, like, my strengths, I think it's typically when they ask questions about my strengths, I always have an answer that ties back to growing up in the military, right? And about
Okay.
how I think my biggest strengths as an adult and as a professional is my ability to adapt to change, to be flexible, and to, communicate with people from different backgrounds and different styles. And I know that I got all those strengths growing up in the military because that's how I had to survive
Hmm.
um in the military world. And so, like, as an adult, I am so I mean, if something changes, I'm quick to adapt to it. And if something changes, I'm flexible with plans. I don't think plans are very rigid because anything can happen and you have to be able to adjust to it. And also coming out of the military, like, if you move all the time and you want friends, you're just gonna have to talk to anybody. And
Hmm.
so as an adult, I'm like, put me in a room with strangers, and in 5 minutes, I'll find something in common, and it'll be fine. Like, I am so social because of that experience. I have no problem talking to people because of that experience, and so, like, I always attribute those three strengths to growing
Hmm.
up in the military.
Oh, that's great. I may have to steal that for job interviews.
It's a good answer, for sure. It's definitely a good answer.
I'm always like, before job interview, I'm like, okay, I know they're gonna ask about strengths and
Yeah.
areas for development. Yes, that's a great answer. You put in the whole like military background and
Yeah. It's a good one. I've been using it for like 10 years now.
and you're obviously very successful, so it must be working, right?
It's working so far.
So great. So is there anything else you want to like talk about or say or add or anything?
No, I think we covered all of it, other than just, like, I think it was such a great experience growing up in the military, and I think it's even cooler growing up as biracial in the
Hmm.
military and just being able to be exposed. I think that's one of the things that I thanked my dad about is, like, as a kid growing up in the military, it gave us exposure
Hmm.
to the literal world that I often, like, feel bad for people like, for kids that didn't grow up in the military,
Right.
because I'm like, you don't know what it's like to get out of where the city that you're
Hmm.
from and, like, see the world from different perspectives and different cultures and have to blend in. And I think kids in the military, we're given such a unique experience. Um, I know I adjusted better than, you know, one of my other sisters, and so she probably
Mhm.
wouldn't speak as highly of the experience as I would, but I just think it's such a cool experience that we get, and the exposure is incredible, and like the lessons that we learn, it's always interesting to see how they manifest themselves into our adult life. And I almost joined the military myself because I wanted to continue that like moving sensation.
Right.
And then my dad was like, no, you don't need to do that. And so I'm also glad I didn't join the military, and I found other ways to keep that going. But I'm very thankful for that experience.
No, I 100% agree with that. Like now that like when I moved to Chicago, I'm like, my husband was born and raised here. The only other place he moved to Arizona for a few years, and that's where we met. And then, he came back to Chicago. And I think that, and just like meeting other people. And then even in college, a lot of the people were from Chicago. And so I think, like a lot of people do tend to like, they get stuck and
Yeah.
they're not comfortable thinking out of the box, getting out of their little bubble, or like meeting new people who, and exploring and learning and
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And so like now that I'm a parent, like I try to make sure that my kids are comfortable with
Mhm.
things like that. Like we try to travel, we try to get out of our box a little bit and meet different people, and just think of things outside of yourself and
Yeah.
how they would be. Yeah, 100% agree with that. Well, thank you for coming on, Katherine. It was great chatting with you and finally meeting you.
Thanks for having me. I think this was a fun conversation.
It was. Maybe we'll have to try. I do want to try to get like all of my siblings, because there's 5 siblings in my family. And so
Oh
it'll
my
be,
God, really? Is
yeah,
she the youngest? No.
Karen is the youngest.
Oh.
So I got 2 older sisters who are twins, and then my brother, and then me, and then Karen, and we're all 3 years apart. So it would be interesting to like I guess here I talked to Karen mostly about like our military life experience, and then
Uh-huh.
because my 2 older sisters and my brother, we were we left when my dad was towards the end of his career. So but it would be interesting to hear like all of our input and how we handled it. And then
Uh-huh.
like maybe we could have all of your guys' siblings if we figured out a time.
Oh, that'd be
See
cool.
how like all of that, like your guys' is different experience, because it's an interesting thing, the siblings, right? Like, and how
Yeah.
each sibling um I guess sees and was able to adjust and cope with, and what their opinions are of their
Yeah.
experience, what their experiences were as a military child versus another sibling. So
Yeah. Well, I
it's,
know that all 5 of us are going to be together next month.
oh, then maybe we'll have
Yes.
to try to get one Zoom call and you guys all huddle in.
Yes.
Because I always think of it, and then I think about like, and then is there like an age thing, or like, when did the parent retire? Like what, at what age? And
Yeah.
so I'm a social, like I have a sociology major. So like my undergrad and grad degrees are both in
Oh.
sociology. So I always think about like those kinds of things. And like when I look at research and theories and like
Hmm.
things like this, I'm just like, what are the other aspects of this like small group now that kind
Yeah.
of stick out? Why does this person feel this way? And so yeah, so next month let's try and we can
I'm
try and do that.
gonna text all
See,
of them now that we're gonna go on
yes,
a podcast and talk about our experience with Karen's sister.
yes, maybe we can get Karen on too, and we can just all, it may be like a 2-3 hour podcast episode, but we could do parts, I guess.
Super cool.